Okay, so I'm gonna do this first video while I'm driving because Matt Botion will not stop texting me and harassing me. So, yeah, enjoy my drive home and listen to this video. The first one I want to talk about was the prophecy request that I had, because I have a lot of people that ask me like on a daily basis about prophecy and like what exactly the deck does and how to beat the deck and blah blah. You know, like the average like bitchings of. I should probably have my lights on. Of things that people don't like about prophecy, like Jowgen and all that. First off, like the build now for prophecy is not at all what it was before, because they changed. As is the meta changes, everything always changes. That's Yu-Gi-Oh. But what prophecy originally did was obviously they ran the 3 copies of Priestess, and you know, like they ran Lilies and Justice and Temperance, like the actual prophecy monsters for the most part, some of them at least. And I mean, enough people have seen that build so they can kind of understand what the deck did. The old deck would basically try to get Priestess out, make advantage by dumping spellbooks, and then blow shit up. Like very, very linear in its actions as far as pushing for game, as it basically like deployed a Hyperion type strategy. High Priestess being Pyrion, and the skill though level of that deck, I would say, is much greater than the build now, because that was prior to Judgment, and you had to basically predict your opponent's next turn before you even like went through with a play. It was very like the skill wasn't so much in your pushing for game, because like I said, you basically just dropped Priestess and pushed, but to figure out what your opponent was going to do and plan what spellbooks to grab, because you didn't have Judgment at that time to grab like your entire deck. It took a lot of foresight and a lot of planning and a lot of player knowledge on not just like their deck, but what the opponent's deck typically runs and the typical plays for it, you know, depending on what their matchup was. So that build wasn't nearly as strong as what the build is now for the meta. Priestess is not a bad card, Priestess is a good card, but it's a mediocre boss monster. It's not essential to the deck like Dracosac is essential to dragons, and it's no Abyss Megalo like for the deck. Like, you're not gonna like, I don't know, you're not gonna summon Priestess and wipe their entire field and then OTK them with her. Like, it just doesn't work like that. Like, she's a good card, but she's not broken. She's your average like boss monster. So basically, that build was not really living up to the hype that Prophecy had, and they were losing to Evil Swarm, which they shouldn't, because Prophecy should just basically rail Evil Swarm, simply because Fate does not target. So like the safe zones and all that, and dresses, like, they do nothing to that, and they can just power over your monsters anyway. But the problem was, I don't think people understood how broken Starhall was then. I saw some people citing it in, but they weren't like, no, I don't think people really grasped just how overpowered that card actually is. And so they weren't really running it, and Priestess like would just get caught in your hand with Ophion out and create cloggy hands, and they were losing to a deck they shouldn't really be losing to. And on top of that, other than like Priestess would be used to burn Lad against the Dragon matchup, because you can just keep revealing her. So basically, Dragons were like, okay, well, we don't want to risk the triple Lad build because Priestess can just burn and they can make huge advantage, yada yada yada. So Dragons changed their build up a little bit, and what that did was it made Priestess like even crappier than she was already becoming because of Ophion. So like that hurt the deck even more, and because of that, just like all good meta decks, Prophecy had to change its build. So now what Prophecy does is it basically creates a castle for Jowgen. Like, that's the simplest way to put it, and Kaiku. Basically, if you're good at all, you're not going to be running Priestess anymore, because she's not, like, she just hinders the deck. And most of the Prophecy monsters, except for the little bitch, Spellbook Magician, whatever the hell her name is. She's still in the deck, obviously, because, I mean, she's a Stratos for the deck, and, like, she's broken in her own right because she grabs secrets, but other than her, the deck basically just does this one thing. Protects Jowgen and Kaiku. They use Star Hall to boost the Kaiku. You usually end up with somewhere around a 2500 Kaiku, plussing off a Judgment and your Star Hall. So they run the copies of Star Hall, and they buff the Jowgen and the Kaiku, which, I mean, you have to buff Jowgen a shit ton for him to not get run over because he's weak as hell, but past that, it doesn't matter, because what they're going to do is they're going to grab everything they need, because Judgment's a broken, stupid card. They're going to play the Jowgen, which they can get off Judgment. They're going to get the Kaiku out, with whatever, via normal summon or however. And they're basically going to set the Wisdom or the Fate and call it game. And if you don't, understand how hard that is to break through, have somebody just play you on Dev Pro or DN or something and let them set that up first and then try to get through it. Because it's really, really hard. A good Spellbook player can basically protect themselves from almost anything in that situation. Dragons in that scenario, they're pretty much only feasible out to that without some weird tech card is to either Dark Hole, since that's coming back to the main deck, or Eclipse, and watch Wisdom get wasted on one of them. Not wasted, but they're going to have to protect one of them. And then the other one's going to stay up on the field. And they'd basically have to have a Blaster at that point on top of that before they could even start their plays. So if you don't have, even if you just have Blaster, if you go Blaster and destroy the Kaiku or anything or whatever, vice versa, typically you'd want to get rid of the Kaiku though first, and then try and normal summon the Pebbles, because that's their way out of it. You're just gonna get hit with Fate, and then there's your normal summon, and you're not specialing, and then Spellbooks are just gonna do their thing again on the next turn, and both of the cards will be even bigger when they bring Kaiku back or summon another one, and it's really ridiculous in what it does, because we are in a basically 2-deck meta with 3 other decks lingering they're just under them, which is, Mermails, Constellars, which are actually being placed above Ophion and Friends now. And then you have Ophion and Friends. Those are basically your big 5 decks. The thing is, Constellars shouldn't have a good matchup against Prophecy either, just because the way it works, you can't really, if they establish their field first, you're basically done. Or if you misplay one time, you're basically done. Obviously, for the current Mermail build, Spellbooks is a bad matchup. I would say Mermails has a better matchup against Spellbooks than the other 3, though, for the simple fact that Spellbooks, like Dragons, if you can clear their field, they can be OTK'd very quickly, which was my next point. People were asking how to beat the deck. And, I mean, obviously this doesn't apply to every situation or every match up, because I'm running Mermails, so, obviously my deck OTKs. So, usually for me, what I do is I'll save my infantry, and I'll save my hardcore combo pieces, like my OTK, my Diva, and Megalo OTK, whatever. And I wait, because they can only activate 1 Fate and Wisdom a turn. So, regardless of whether they have, 2 set, they're not going to do that. You can take a little bit of damage before Kaiku gets too big and starts annihilating your graveyard, but if you can just make that one big play where that most likely, unless something very weird happens, you're going to be able to clear the Kaiku. Not the Kaiku, I'm sorry. If this is Mermail, clear the Jowgen. Then I can basically OTK them with ease, as long as they don't have, a threatening down or something. But if that happens, that happens. You can't predict everything, and that's not a situation where your deck did anything wrong. They just happen to have the card down. But that's my approach for my deck. It's basically timing. The same with Dragons. If you ever catch Dragons with a clear field, you can basically OTK them quite easily. They run the Scarecrow, but if they don't have the Scarecrow, that's about all they run. They don't run Trags and Gores and all that stuff. So if you clear their field, you've probably have a pretty good chance of dealing massive damage. Also, you can, I know it's a little off topic spellbooks, but you can basically like outspeed Dragon in some situations, because regardless of the fact that they're a spam deck, they're a control-based spam deck, where they basically just focus on cornering you with Dragossack and making you waste your resources to get around something that isn't, like, it's just very easy for them to create. So they're not really negging, and you are. But you can outspeed them and hammer into them and force them to remove dragons too fast. And if they don't have the rejuve when they're doing all that stuff, basically, like, you can cause them to be so stunted early game that they just can't replenish their resources fast enough. Again, if they have the rejuve, they have the rejuve. You can't do anything about that. That's why broken cards are broken. But that's just a way to take out both of those decks, essentially. Also, any deck that can run Eradicator. Eradicator is easily the best out to spellbooks. If you Eradicate them and you still lose, like, there's a problem. Even people were saying, or complaining that if you don't make Big Eye, then you can't Eradicator. But I see a lot of decks using it with Colossal Fighter, like any deck that can Synchro, because, I mean, he's a Dark. So you can always do that, and it is chainable, so, like, even if they, something was about to happen to your monster, you can still chain the Eradicator and clear their shit. So that's good. But yeah, the thing is, I believe right now, with the way the game is, I think Prophecy is the best deck. I think Dragon Rulers have all the grinding advantage and power that a deck could possibly want to be a top deck. But Spellbook's new build just, like, eats them. I don't really see, unless Dragon Ruler opens really broken or they have some goofy tech, how a typical Dragon Ruler player is going to beat the new Prophecy build, because it's stupid. Like, I mean, if you saw or read the finals to the last Nationals that Prophecy won, like, it was kind of pathetic if you read some of the featured matches, or if you read, like, the final match. It was pretty quick. And I don't know, many of you probably don't know who Michelle Gruner is, but he got his ass kicked by Prophecy, and Michelle Gruner is, like, one of the best players in the entire world, so that's saying something right there. But yeah, that's kind of the deal with Prophecy. They have gone from being a boss monster spamming deck that actually used their own archetype to a deck that basically just defends, protects, and buffs Jowgen and Kaiku. It's really not even Prophecy anymore, honestly, but it's very effective, and because Dragon Rulers have caused a lot of other decks to die out, all Prophecy really has to worry about is Dragon Rulers, since they already beat Evil Swarm, and that's pretty much that on Prophecy. So